The year was 2387. Planet Vorrath was not a place where things survived easily. The trees were tall and black. The sky was a deep purple color. The air was thick and heavy, hard to breathe for someone who was not born there. Strange sounds came from every direction. Things moved in the shadows that no human had ever named. It was not a place for humans. It had never been a place for humans. And yet, Sergeant Marcus Cole was walking through it alone. His boots were heavy with mud. His left shoulder had a deep cut from the crash. His radio was broken. His team was gone. His ship was nothing but burning metal pieces spread across 3 kilometers of alien jungle. He had checked 3 times. Nobody survived, just him. Marcus stopped walking for a moment and looked up at the purple sky through the black trees. He took a slow breath. His mind was tired. His body was tired. But he kept his eyes sharp. Stay alert. Stay alive. That was the rule. He had 1 weapon with 11 shots. 3 small packets of food, a basic medical kit, and no signal. He started walking again. He did not know that he was already being watched. High up in the trees, silent as shadows, 3 Krath scouts had been following him since the moment his ship crashed. They moved without sound. They always moved without sound. That was what made the Krath so dangerous. They were large creatures, gray skin like stone, long arms, eyes that could see perfectly in complete darkness. They had been the top predators on Vorrath for thousands of years, and they hated humans, not just disliked. Not just feared, hated, deep, old, burning hate, built over 100 years of war, broken agreements, and lost lives on both sides. The 3 scouts watched, Marcus walking below them. One of them whispered quietly. One human, alone, wounded, no backup signal. Another one replied, "Should we take him?" The third one, the senior scout, said nothing for a moment. He just watched the human moving slowly through the trees. Something about the way the human moved was different. No aggression, no hunting posture. He was just walking, like someone who was lost and trying to find a way home. "Report to the elder first," the senior scout said finally. "Do not touch him yet. Just watch." Marcus found the cave just before the light started fading. It was small, low ceiling, hidden behind a large black rock. Not perfect, but it was shelter. On Vorrath, shelter meant survival. He stepped inside slowly. He stopped. There was a sound coming from the back of the cave. Low, rough, somewhere between a growl and a cry. Marcus did not move. He stood completely still and waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness. Then he saw it, a Krath cub, small, maybe the size of a large dog back on Earth, gray skin, big yellow eyes glowing in the dark. One of its back legs was bent in a wrong direction, clearly injured. It was alone, scared, and it had nowhere to go. The cub saw Marcus at the same moment, its lips pulled back, small sharp teeth showing. A warning growl filled the small cave. Marcus raised both hands slowly, palms open. "No weapon." "Hey," he said quietly. "Easy, easy, I'm not going to hurt you." The cub did not understand the words. Of course it didn't, but it understood the voice, soft, slow, no threat in it. Still, fear is not always logical. Marcus took one small, careful step forward, and the cub launched itself at him. The teeth went right into his, forearm, hard, deep, real. Marcus made a short, sharp sound through his teeth, pain shooting up his arm immediately. His first instinct was to pull back. Shake it off, his training said. Create distance from the threat. But he stopped himself. He looked down at the cub. It was still biting. But its whole body was shaking badly. Its injured leg was dragging. Its big yellow eyes, even while biting, looked more terrified than aggressive. It's not attacking, Marcus thought clearly. It's terrified. He stayed completely still. He let the pain sit. He did not pull away. Slowly and very slowly, he lowered himself down to the ground. Sitting position, non-threatening, small as possible. The cub released his arm. It stepped back, breathing fast. Marcus and the cub stared at each other in the dark cave. Blood was running down Marcus's arm now, dripping off his fingers onto the cave floor. He did not look at the wound. He kept his eyes on the cub, calm, steady, quiet. Then he reached slowly into his pack with his other hand. He pulled out a small ration bar, He broke a piece off carefully and he placed it gently on the ground. Then he pushed it forward, slowly, toward the cub. Outside the cave, hidden perfectly in the dark trees. The 3 Krath scouts watched. Everything. The senior scout had not moved in 2 full minutes. His weapon was still raised, but his finger had slowly moved away from the trigger. He watched the human sitting on the cold cave floor, bleeding, not moving, not fighting back, just offering food to the creature that had just bitten him. The senior scout lowered his weapon completely. His voice came out quiet, almost a whisper. "Did you see that?" Nobody answered, because none of them had words for what they had just seen. The cave was cold when morning came. A thin, pale light crept slowly through the narrow cave opening, spreading across the dark stone floor like something cautious and unsure of itself. The jungle outside had gone quiet in that strange way it does just before dawn, that brief moment when even the most dangerous things in the world seem to hold their breath. Marcus Cole was already awake. He had not slept much. His arm was throbbing steadily where the cub had bitten him the night before, and he had spent 2 hours in the dark carefully cleaning and wrapping the wound with the last clean bandage from his medical kit. It was not deep enough to be deadly, but it hurt. Every time he moved his fingers, he felt it. He sat with his back against the cave wall, knees up, watching the small shape sleeping near the opposite side of the cave. The Krath cub had not come closer during the night. It had not eaten the piece of ration bar Marcus had placed on the ground either, but it had stayed. It had curled itself into a tight ball near the back wall, its injured leg stretched out carefully to the side, and at some point in the deep darkness of the night, it had fallen asleep. That meant something. Marcus knew it meant something. A scared animal does not sleep near a threat. Fear keeps things awake. The fact that this small creature, alone, injured, and surrounded by a situation it did not understand, had somehow found enough calm to close its eyes. Marcus sat with that thought for a long time. He pulled out his last full ration bar, broke it carefully in half, and set one piece quietly on the ground, a little closer than the night before. Then he leaned his head back against the stone wall and waited. The cub woke up slowly. Its big yellow eyes opened, blinked once, and immediately found Marcus across the cave. For a long moment it did not move at all, just watched him with that sharp, unblinking animal focus. Marcus did not move either. He kept his breathing slow and his hands visible and open on his knees. No sudden movements. No eye contact held too long. Just presence. Calm, patient, unthreatening presence. The cub's nose moved. It was picking up the smell of the food. Its eyes dropped to the piece of ration bar on the ground, then came back up to Marcus. It did this 3 times. Food, human, working something out in its small mind that no language could explain. Then very carefully, it stood up. Its injured back leg trembled under its weight and a low sound escaped it, something between a whimper and a growl. Marcus watched it struggle to stand and felt something tighten in his chest. Without thinking, he reached slowly into his kit and pulled out a thin roll of cloth bandage. He held it up so the cub could see it. Not moving forward, just showing it. The cub froze immediately and pulled its lips back in a warning. Marcus stayed still and kept his voice low and steady. I know you don't trust me. That's okay. You don't have to yet." He set the bandage down on the ground in front of him and left his hands open. The cub watched him for another long moment. Then it looked at the food again. And this time, slowly, carefully, ready to run at any second, it limped forward and lowered its head to eat. Marcus did not move a single muscle. The elder arrives. What Marcus did not know was that he was no longer being watched by just 3 scouts. Sometime during the night, word had traveled fast through the Krath communication network, a series of low-frequency signals built into small devices every scout carried. The senior scout's report had been short, but unusual enough to move up the chain immediately. By the time the first pale light touched the treetops, a much larger group had gathered silently in the jungle outside the cave, and at the center of that group stood someone whose presence changed the weight of the air around him. Elder Vorrath was not a tall Krath by their standards, but he carried himself in a way that made him seem larger than anyone near him. His gray skin was marked with old scars running in long lines across his face and arms, each one a story, each one earned. He had led his people through 15 years of active conflict and 25 years of cold, quiet tension before that. He had seen humans in battle. He had studied them, fought them, lost warriors to them, and taken their lives in return. He thought he understood them completely. He stood now at the tree line, completely hidden, and watched the human inside the cave feed a piece of food to a Krath cub. Nobody around him spoke. Nobody moved. They all stood there in the growing morning light and watched this thing that none of their experience had prepared them for. Commander Vorrath stood just behind the elder's left shoulder, his large hand wrapped tightly around the handle of his weapon, his jaw set hard. Vorrath was the kind of warrior who had built his entire understanding of the universe on one simple rule. Strength was respected, weakness was punished, and mercy was just another word for hesitation. Watching a human sit calmly on the ground and offer food to a cub that had just drawn his blood was not fitting into any category Vorrath had ever created. "He is performing a trick," Vorrath said quietly, his voice low and controlled. "He knows we are watching. He is trying to make us lower our guard." The elder did not respond immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the scene inside the cave, the human's open hands, the cub's cautious approach, the absolute stillness Marcus held while the cub ate. "He does not know we are watching," the elder said finally, his voice even quieter than Vorrath's. "His eyes have not moved toward the trees once. His body position is not for performance. It is for the cub." Vorrath said nothing to that, but his grip on his weapon did not loosen. The moment everything shifted, when the cub finished eating, it sat back and looked at Marcus again with those wide yellow eyes. Marcus smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile, and said quietly, "Good, see? Not so bad." Then he picked up the cloth bandage from the ground, held it between both hands so the cub could see exactly what it was, and very slowly began moving forward on his knees. The cub stiffened. Its growl returned, and low, automatic, instinctive. Marcus stopped moving immediately and just waited. He did not retreat. He did not advance. He simply stayed exactly where he was and let the cub decide. 30 seconds passed. A minute, the growl faded. The cub looked at its own injured leg, then back at Marcus. Marcus moved forward again. Slower this time, even smaller movements, lowering himself further so he was almost lying flat on the cave floor, making himself as small and unthreatening as possible. The cub watched him come closer with enormous focus but did not growl again. When Marcus finally reached it, he paused with his hands just short of touching and waited one more time. The cub sniffed his hands carefully, taking in his smell, reading everything about him that words could never communicate. Then it sat still. Marcus worked slowly and gently, wrapping the injured leg with the bandage, keeping his movements smooth and predictable. When the cub flinched, he stopped. When it settled, he continued. It took almost 20 minutes to do something that would normally take 2. But when he was done, he sat back and looked at the cub with quiet satisfaction. The cub looked down at its wrapped leg. Then it made a sound that Marcus had never heard before, soft, low, with a strange rising note at the end of it. Not a growl, not a warning. Something else entirely. Outside in the trees, Elder Krath went completely still. The sound reached him clearly in the morning quiet, and when it did, something moved across his face that his warriors had almost never seen there. His eyes widened slightly. His breath stopped for just a moment. Then he turned his head slowly toward his senior scout and spoke in a voice so low that only those right beside him could hear it. "That sound," he said. "That is the sound our cubs make only for their mothers, when they feel safe." The senior scout stared at the elder without speaking. Vorrath, standing just behind, said nothing at all, because there was nothing to say. The cub had made its judgment before any of them had made theirs. The elder stood quietly for another long moment, watching the human and the cub sitting together in the pale morning light inside the cave. Then he made a decision that surprised every warrior standing with him. He reached up and carefully unclipped the weapon from his belt. He handed it back to the scout behind him without looking, and then he stepped out of the trees, alone, unarmed, and unhidden, and walked toward the cave entrance. The warriors behind him shifted immediately with alarm, hands moving to weapons, several voices starting quiet and urgent objections. The elder raised one hand backward without turning around, and every voice stopped and every hand stilled. He kept walking. Marcus heard the footstep at the cave entrance and was on his feet in less than a second, weapon raised, body turned to face the opening. His training was fast and it was good, and it had kept him alive for 11 years. But then he saw what was standing at the entrance, an enormous, gray-skinned, scarred, ancient-looking, and he understood immediately that if this creature had wanted him dead, he would not have heard the footstep at all. He would simply have never woken up. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus lowered his weapon. Not all the way, halfway, a gesture that said, "I see you. I am not attacking. But I am not helpless either." The elder looked at the lowered weapon, and something shifted in his expression, something that might have been the earliest beginning of respect. They stood there looking at each other across the small cave, two representatives of species that had been killing each other for 100 years. With a small cub sitting calmly between them on the cave floor, the elder's eyes moved from Marcus to the cub's bandaged leg, then back to Marcus, then to Marcus's own bandaged arm, then back to his face. When he finally spoke, the words came slowly in rough, old, barely used human language, pulled from somewhere deep in memory, learned from old records and prisoner interrogations decades ago. "You are not afraid of us?" Marcus held the elder's gaze steadily. He thought about lying. He thought about sounding strong. Then he decided against both. "I'm terrified," he said honestly. "But the cub was more scared than me." The elder looked at him for a very long time after that, long enough that Marcus started to wonder if the translation had worked, or if he had somehow said the wrong thing entirely. Then the elder turned slowly and looked back at the warriors waiting in the trees. His voice came out low and carrying and completely final. "Bring him to camp." The walk into the camp. The path through the jungle to the Krath camp took nearly 2 hours on foot. It was not a comfortable 2 hours. Marcus walked surrounded on all sides by Krath warriors. Large, silent, stone-faced, each one carrying weapons that could end him before he took a second breath. None of them spoke to him. None of them looked at him directly either, which was somehow more unsettling than if they had. They moved through the black trees with the kind of ease that comes from a lifetime of knowing every root, every shadow, every sound in a place. Marcus moved carefully, watching his footing, keeping his breathing steady, and focusing on the one thing that was making the whole situation feel slightly less like a walk toward his own execution. The cub was still at his heels. It had followed him out of the cave without hesitation, limping steadily on its wrapped leg, staying close enough that Marcus could hear its breathing beside him. Several of the warriors had glanced down at it with expressions that were difficult to read, not hostile exactly, but deeply uncertain, like they were looking at something that was behaving outside the rules they had been given for understanding the world. At one point, one of the younger warriors had crouched down and made a soft sound toward the cub, clearly an attempt to call it away from Marcus, to bring it back where it belonged. The cub had looked at the warrior, then looked back at Marcus and kept walking forward. The young warrior had stood back up slowly and said nothing, but Marcus had noticed his eyes stay on the cub for a long time after that. Elder Vorrath walked at the front of the group, setting the pace, saying nothing to anyone. His back was straight and his movement was unhurried. He gave off the particular kind of calm that belongs only to people who have made a decision, and made peace with it completely before acting on it. Marcus had met commanders like that during his years of service, men and women who had seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by it and start simply responding to what was real rather than what was expected. He had respected those commanders more than almost anyone else he had ever served under. He found himself strangely feeling something similar toward this alien elder he had known for less than an hour. Vorrath walked just behind the elder and slightly to the right, and Marcus had already quietly identified him as the one to watch. Not because he was the largest, he was not, and not because his weapon looked the most dangerous and they all looked equally dangerous. It was something in the way Vorrath moved, controlled, precise, always slightly tense, like a door being held shut against pressure from the other side. Marcus had known soldiers like that too. They were not bad soldiers. They were often excellent soldiers, but they were the ones who needed the clearest possible orders in unclear situations, because when the orders stopped making sense to them, they made their own. Entering the camp appeared suddenly between the trees, not gradually, not with warning signs or fences or any of the familiar markers that human military camps use to announce themselves. One moment there was jungle, and the next moment there were structures, fires, and several hundred Krath going about the business of their day. It was large, larger than Marcus had expected. Stone buildings mixed with structures made from the black wood of the jungle trees. Everything built low and solid and permanent looking, like it had been there for generations and intended to stay for several more. Fires burned in carved stone pits throughout the camp, and the smell of something cooking reached Marcus before he had fully processed what he was seeing. And then the camp noticed him. It happened in a wave, moving outward from the entrance, heads turning, movement stopping, conversations cutting off mid-sentence. Within 30 seconds of Marcus crossing the camp boundary, every single pair of eyes in that space was on him. Warriors twice his size stared from doorways. Older Krath watched from where they sat near fires. Younger ones, not quite cubs but not yet full warriors, stood in groups and stared with the particular intense curiosity of the young, who have not yet learned to hide what they feel on their faces. A few of the smaller cubs scattered behind the legs of adults, peering out from safety at this strange pale creature walking through their home. Marcus kept his eyes forward, his posture straight but not aggressive, his face as calm as he could keep it. He had trained for high-pressure situations. He had been shot at, ambushed, trapped, and once left for dead on a moon with no atmosphere. But nothing in his training had included a chapter on walking through a camp of several hundred beings who had spent their entire lives being told that humans were the enemy. The weight of all those eyes was physical. He felt it on his skin like heat. He kept walking. The cub at his heels seemed completely unbothered. It moved through the camp with the easy confidence of something that knew it belonged there, occasionally glancing up at Marcus as if checking that he was still following rather than the other way around. And as the camp watched, the whispers started moving through the crowd like wind through grass. Low, fast, spreading in every direction at once. Marcus could not understand the Krath language, but he did not need to. He could read the shape of what was being communicated in the way faces changed as the whisper reached them. Shock first, then something harder to name, something that sat between confusion and a reluctant, unwilling fascination. Elder Vorrath led Marcus to a large open area near the center of camp, where a broad flat stone served as a table and several carved stone seats surrounded a deep fire pit. He gestured for Marcus to sit, which Marcus did carefully, keeping his movements slow and visible. The elder sat across from him. Several senior warriors arranged themselves in a loose ring around the fire, not sitting, standing, arms at their sides, watching. Vorrath took a position just outside the circle, slightly apart from the others, his expression still that same carefully controlled blankness that Marcus had been watching since the cave. The conversation at the fire. For a long moment, the elder simply looked at Marcus across the fire. The flames between them threw orange light across both their faces and sent long shadows stretching backward into the camp. Around them, the rest of the Krath had not dispersed. They had settled into a wider circle beyond the warriors, hundreds of them, standing and sitting and watching in complete silence. Marcus had the strange feeling of being at the center of something much larger than himself. A feeling he had experienced before in his life, but never quite like this. Never with this much riding on whether he said the right thing or the wrong thing. Never with this particular combination of danger and possibility hanging in the air at the same time. The elder spoke first. His human language was rough and slow, and clearly pulled from a place in his memory that had not been visited in many years. But the words were clear enough. "You came to our world as a soldier," he said. It was not a question. Marcus nodded once. "Yes." The elder's eyes moved briefly to Marcus's bandaged arm, then back to his face. "The cub attacked you. You had the right to defend yourself. Every law of this world gives you that right. Our own law gives you that right." He paused, letting the weight of what he was about to say gather properly before he released it. "Why did you not use it?" Marcus thought about the question seriously before answering. Because it deserved a serious answer, and he could feel, in the silence of the hundreds of beings surrounding him, in the stillness of the elder across the fire, in the absolute focused attention of every warrior in that ring, that everyone present understood it deserved one. He looked down at the cub, which had settled itself beside his feet with its wrapped legs stretched out carefully, its yellow eyes half closed in the warmth of the fire. Then he looked back up at the elder. "Because it wasn't attacking me," Marcus said. "It was scared. There's a difference. Something that attacks you wants to hurt you. Something that's scared just wants to feel safe. Hurting it back wouldn't have made either of us safer. It would have just made both of us more afraid. He paused for a moment and then added more quietly, "Where I come from, we try to tell the difference. We don't always get it right, but we try." The elder sat with those words for what felt like a very long time. The fire crackled between them. Behind Marcus, the camp remained absolutely silent in a way that felt less like the silence of waiting and more like the silence of something being carefully, slowly processed. Then from the standing ring of warriors, Vorrath's voice came forward, controlled, deliberate, carrying the particular sharp edge of someone who has been holding something back and has decided it has been held back long enough. "One act," Vorrath said. "One moment of softness toward a cub, and you would have us believe this represents your kind?" His eyes moved across the assembled warriors as he continued, giving the words room to reach everyone listening. 100 years. 100 years of war, broken agreements, burned settlements, and dead warriors on both sides. One piece of food on a cave floor does not erase that history. It does not balance those scales, and it does not make this human something different from what every human before him has shown us they are. The words landed in the silence like stones dropped into still water, and Marcus could feel the ripples of them moving through the crowd. The way certain heads nodded slightly. The way certain shoulders shifted. The way Vorrath's argument found the places in people where old grief and old anger still lived and pressed on them. He was not wrong, Marcus thought. That was the difficult thing. He was not wrong about the history. He was not wrong about the weight of 100 years. He was making a completely rational argument built on completely real facts, and Marcus did not have a counter-argument that could erase those facts because they could not be erased. They were real. They had happened. People on both sides had died because of them. Marcus looked at Vorrath directly and spoke carefully. "You're right," he said. Vorrath's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He had clearly expected either denial or deflection, not agreement. Marcus continued, "I can't change what happened before I got here. I can't speak for every human who ever stood on this planet. I can't balance scales that heavy with one piece of food or one bandage. I know that." He paused and let that sit for a moment before going on. "But I can tell you what I did in that cave and why I did it. The cub was hurt and scared and alone, and I had the ability to help it. That's the whole reason. No strategy, no trick. No performance for an audience I didn't know was there. Just something small and frightened needed help, and I could give it, so I did." He looked back at the elder then, and his voice stayed even and quiet. "I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's the truth. The weight of truth." The elder looked at Marcus for a long moment after he finished speaking. Then he looked at Vorrath. Then he looked out at the assembled camp. Hundreds of faces looking back at him, waiting for him to tell them what to think, what to feel, what to do with this impossible situation that had walked into their world on its own 2 feet and sat down at their fire. The elder had led these people for a long time. He had made hard decisions in hard moments his entire life. He had sent warriors to die and stood over the bodies of friends and carried the weight of leadership through things that would have broken someone who had not spent a lifetime, building the specific kind of strength that leadership required. He knew how to read a moment. He knew the difference between what was politically safe and what was true, and he had learned over a very long life that choosing the politically safe thing over the true thing was a debt that always came due eventually. Always, without exception, at a cost far higher than the original decision had been worth. He stood up from his seat slowly, and the movement alone was enough to draw every eye in the camp back to him completely. When he spoke in the Krath language, loud and clear, directed at his people rather than at Marcus. And his voice carried the particular authority of someone who is not making a suggestion, but delivering a truth that has already been decided. One of the younger bilingual warriors quietly translated for Marcus in a low voice beside him, and Marcus listened carefully as the elder's words came through. "This human came to our world alone," the elder said. "He came without his army and without his weapons drawn. He found one of our youngest and most vulnerable, and when that cub, out of fear and pain, drew his blood, he did not retaliate. He did not threaten. He did not run. He sat down on the ground and he offered food and he gave what healing he had available in his hands. I have fought humans. I have studied humans. I have spent 40 years preparing my people to face humans. And I tell you now, I have never seen this. Not once in 40 years have I seen this." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was quieter, but somehow carried even further in the silence. "What Vorrath says about our history is true. Every word of it. But history is what has already happened. What we do next is still ours to decide, and I will not let the weight of what is behind us blind us to what is standing right in front of us." Vorrath did not respond. He stood very still, and something in his face had shifted in a way that was subtle but visible to anyone watching carefully. The tightness around his eyes had changed. The set of his jaw had changed, and while none of it was anything close to agreement, it was no longer the hard, flat certainty it had been before. It was something more complicated and more honest than certainty. It was a warrior beginning against his own considerable resistance to sit with a question he had never allowed himself to ask before. What grew in the quiet? The days that followed were not simple. Marcus was not welcomed into the camp the way a guest is welcomed, with warmth and ease and open doors. He was given a space to sleep, a share of food at meals, and the freedom to move through the common areas of the camp during the day. Beyond that, most of the Krath gave him a wide berth that was not quite hostile but was clearly careful. He understood it. He did not push against it. He did what he had done in the cave. He was present, he was patient, he was consistent, and he let others decide when and how much they wanted to close the distance. The cub stayed with him almost constantly. Its leg was healing well, and Marcus checked and rewrapped the bandage each morning in the same careful way he had done in the cave. This became, without either of them planning it, something like a ritual, the cub arriving at Marcus's sleeping space each morning before he had fully woken up, settling itself beside him and waiting with patient yellow eyes while he worked. Several of the younger Krath who had watched that first night with the intense curiosity of the young began drifting closer during these morning rituals, close enough to watch, far enough to retreat quickly if needed. Marcus acknowledged them without making a big thing of it. A glance, a nod, continuing what he was doing. And over the course of 3 days they drifted incrementally closer each morning, until 2 of them were sitting near enough to ask questions in careful, halting human words learned from educational records their camp maintained. Marcus answered every question honestly and directly. He talked about Earth, about his family, about what his people ate and how they built things and what they argued about and what they were afraid of. He talked about the war from his own side, not defensively, not with blame, but plainly, the way someone talks about a complicated history they are part of but did not begin. He asked questions back, and he listened carefully to the answers, and he remembered what he was told. He made mistakes and said the wrong thing once, used a gesture that meant something he had not intended, accidentally walked into a space that turned out to carry spiritual significance to the Krath. Each time he made a mistake, he stopped, acknowledged it, and corrected course without embarrassment and without over-apology. "Just, I got that wrong, I understand now, I won't do it again." Vorrath watched all of this from a consistent distance. He did not participate. He did not interfere. He simply watched. The way a careful mind watches something it has not yet finished evaluating. Marcus was aware of that watching and left it alone entirely. He had said what he had to say at the fire. The rest was not something that could be argued or rushed or performed into existence. It either happened or it did not, and it would happen on its own timeline or not at all. On the 3rd evening, Vorrath sat down across the fire from Marcus for the first time. He did not speak immediately. He sat and looked at the fire for several minutes, and Marcus sat quietly on his side and waited, giving the moment whatever room it needed. When Vorrath finally spoke, he spoke in Krath, and the young translator who had taken to sitting near Marcus during evenings rendered the words carefully. "I have fought in 6 major conflicts," Vorrath said. "I have lost people I trained, people I served with, people I considered worth dying for. Several of those losses were at human hands." He paused for a long time. "I am not here to tell you that I have stopped believing what I believed 3 days ago. I am not capable of doing that in 3 days, and I would not insult either of us by pretending I am." Another pause. "But I watched you with the young ones this morning, and I watched you with the cub. And I am sitting here now because I decided that a warrior who stops watching carefully is a warrior who has already started losing." Marcus looked at him across the fire for a moment and then said simply, "That's fair. I'll take it." Vorrath looked at him with an expression that was complicated and layered and honest. Then he nodded once, stood up, and walked away. It was the best thing that had happened in 3 days. And Marcus knew it. The signal on the morning of the 4th day, the communicator on Marcus's belt, dead since the crash, silent for 4 full days, made a sound. A short burst of static, then a repeating pulse. Someone had found the crash site. Someone had picked up his emergency beacon. His people were looking for him, and they were close enough now for the signal to reach. Marcus stood up from where he was sitting and looked down at the communicator and felt a complicated set of things happening in his chest at the same time. Relief, which was simple, and something else that was harder to name, something that had to do with the fact that leaving meant leaving this. Leaving what had started here. Leaving it in a state that was fragile and new and entirely possible to break if the wrong thing happened next. He brought the communicator to the elder immediately. He did not hide it, did not consider hiding it, did not hesitate. He walked directly to the elder's space and held the device out and explained what the signal meant. The elder looked at the communicator for a long moment, then looked at Marcus, and the look between them carried a full conversation without a single word being spoken. The elder called for Vorrath and 3 senior warriors, and there was a discussion in Krath that the translator relayed to Marcus in a low, ongoing voice. A real discussion, with disagreement and pushback and questions and the kind of genuine back and forth that only happens when people take something seriously. At the end of it, the elder turned back to Marcus and said in his slow, careful human language, "Your people will land here. We will receive them. No weapons drawn. No aggression. Whatever they bring to this camp, we will meet it with what you have shown us these 4 days." He paused and then looked at Marcus steadily. "Do you trust that your people will do the same?" Marcus held that gaze and felt the full weight of what was being asked. Not just whether he believed it, but whether he was willing to stake what had been built here on the answer. "I'll make sure of it," he said. "I'll talk to them before they come in. I'll explain everything. They'll listen." The elder studied him for another long moment. Then he said quietly, "Good." The landing, the rescue ship came down in a clearing 1/2 kilometer from the camp, and Marcus was there waiting when the ramp lowered and Captain Yara Singh came down it fast with 6 armed soldiers behind her and the particular expression on her face of someone who has been running worst-case scenarios in their head for 4 days and is not yet ready to stop. She stopped when she saw Marcus standing at the edge of the clearing, alive, standing, apparently uninjured beyond the bandaged arm, and the expression on her face went through several rapid changes before settling into something that was relief and confusion and professional focus all at once. "Ko," she said. "Report." Marcus looked at her steadily and said, "I need 5 minutes before anyone touches a weapon or takes another step toward that tree line. 5 minutes. And then I need you to trust me on something that is going to look impossible." He talked fast and he talked clearly, and Yara Singh was exactly the kind of commander Marcus had hoped she would be. She listened without interrupting, asked 2 sharp, specific questions when he finished, and then stood quietly for a moment processing what she had been told. Behind her, the 6 soldiers held their positions, weapons lowered but present, their eyes moving constantly between Marcus and the tree line. Then Yara turned to her team and gave a single clear order, weapons on safety on backs, hands visible. She got 1 moment of visible resistance from the soldier on her far right, a young man whose expression said everything about what he thought of this plan. Yara looked at him for exactly 2 seconds, and the look was sufficient. His weapon went on his back. Marcus led them toward the camp. He could feel the tension in the group behind him like a physical thing. 6 soldiers trained to read threat in every shadow, walking voluntarily toward a camp full of beings their entire career had classified as the enemy, trusting one man's 5-minute explanation. He felt the responsibility of that trust like weight on his shoulders, and he carried it carefully, and he kept walking. The Krath were waiting at the camp entrance. The elder stood at the front, Vorrath beside him, a line of warriors arranged behind them, weapons visible but hands open, a posture that Marcus recognized from his own side as the military equivalent of, "I am armed and I am choosing not to use it," which in its own way was the loudest possible statement of intent. The cub sat beside Marcus's feet the moment he reached the entrance, appearing from somewhere in the camp with its usual uncanny timing, and Marcus heard one of the soldiers behind him make a short, involuntary sound. half surprise, half something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Yara Singh stepped forward to stand beside Marcus and looked at the elder across the short distance between them. The elder looked back at her. The moment held everything. 100 years of history, every death on both sides, every broken agreement and burned settlement and generation raised to see the other side as the threat that defined their world. It held all of that, and it held something else too. 4 days in a cave and around a fire, a piece of food on a cold floor, a bandage on a small injured leg, and a question asked honestly and answered honestly and heard. Yara Singh raised her right hand, palm forward, fingers together, a human gesture of greeting she had used across a dozen different cultures during her career. It meant nothing specific in Krath culture, but it meant nothing aggressive either. It was simply, I see you, I'm here, I am open. The elder raised his right hand in return, the same shape, different meaning, same truth, the gift before Marcus left. The elder asked him to walk with him one final time, and just the two of them, away from the soldiers and warriors and the weight of history and the enormousness of what had been set in motion. They walked to the edge of the camp where the black trees began, and stood there in the early evening light, and for a while they did not speak. The jungle made its sounds around them, alive, complicated, indifferent to the significance of what two small figures standing at its edge had managed to do. The elder reached into the folds of his outer garment and brought out something small, held it for a moment in his large scarred hand, and then held it out to Marcus. It was a carved stone, small enough to fit in a closed fist, smooth and dark, shaped into a form that Marcus did not immediately recognize. He took it carefully and looked at it, turning it in his fingers. "What does this mean?" he asked. The elder looked at the stone in Marcus's hand for a moment before answering. "In our language there is a word," he said slowly. "It does not translate perfectly. The closest your language comes is one who is trusted. But that is not exactly right. Our word means something more specific than that. It means one who is shown in a moment when they could have chosen otherwise that they understand the difference between power and cruelty. We give this only to those who have earned it fully." He paused. "It has been given to 7 beings in my lifetime. You are the 8th. You are the first who was not Krath." Marcus looked at the stone in his hand for a long time. When he looked up, his voice was quieter than usual. "Does this mean the war is over?" he asked. The elder was quiet for a moment, looking out at the trees, and when he answered, his voice carried the particular careful honesty of someone who refuses to promise what they cannot guarantee, but also refuses to be less than truthful about what they believe. "The war has many parts," he said. "Many people. Many years of grief on both sides that will not disappear because 2 beings stood at a fire and chose to speak plainly. The war, all of it, and will take much longer than one conversation to end." He turned and looked at Marcus directly. "But this moment is real. What happened here is real. And real things, once they exist, cannot be made to not have happened. You came here as a soldier and you leave as something else. What you carry with you, what we have both seen is possible, that travels with you now. And it will reach further than you know." He paused one final time, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and unhurried, and completely certain. "It is no longer necessary. That is what I can tell you today. For the first time in 40 years, it is no longer necessary." The ending Marcus Cole left Vorrath 3 hours later. He walked up the ramp of the rescue ship with a carved stone in his pocket, and a Krath cub sitting at the bottom of the ramp watching him go. Yellow eyes calm and steady, the bandaged leg holding its weight easily now. He stopped at the top of the ramp and looked back one last time. The elder was standing at the edge of the camp, visible between the black trees, watching without expression but present, fully present, the way someone stands when they are witnessing something they want to remember exactly as it is. Vorrath stood a few steps behind him, and for just a moment as Marcus watched, Vorrath raised one hand in a gesture that was not quite the same as Yara's greeting had been, but was clearly trying to be something in that direction. It was awkward and uncertain and completely genuine. Marcus raised his own hand back. Then the ramp closed and the ship lifted and the black jungle fell away below them into the deep purple of the Vorrath sky. Yara Singh sat across from Marcus in the cabin on the way back, and for a long time she just looked at him with the expression of someone who has seen something. They are still assembling into a shape they can hold in their mind. Finally she said, "Command is going to want a full report. Every detail, the whole 4 days. Marcus nodded. I know. She looked at him a moment longer. What do you think they'll do with it? Marcus looked out the small viewport at the planet growing smaller below them. He thought about an elder who had handed back his weapon before walking into a cave. He thought about a cub that had made a sound only for its mother. He thought about a warrior who had sat down across a fire not to agree, but to keep watching carefully. He thought about a carved stone that meant something that did not translate perfectly into any single word. I think, he said slowly, that they'll do what people always do with something true. Some of them will try to use it. Some of them will try to ignore it. And some of them will understand it. He paused. The ones who understand it are the ones who matter. The ship moved through the purple atmosphere of Vorrath and out into the clean black of open space, carrying one soldier. One carved stone in the beginning of something that had no name yet but was undeniably, irreversibly real. The kind of thing that starts small in a cold cave in the dark and grows, quietly and steadily, until it is larger than the war that surrounded it, larger than the history that shaped it, larger than anyone standing inside it can fully see. It had started with teeth in an arm and blood on a cave floor, and a choice that took less than 3 seconds to make. It would take years to finish. But it had started. And that in the end was everything.